Hey guys, how's it going? So I wanted to make another raw video from the van while on the road, talking about mental health or mental strength. And it's such a deep topic, such a deep subject that you could go into there, and you could go into it in a real negative way as well, because generally whenever you hear the term mental health, it's usually associated with some sort of negative connotation, that it generally, something that might come to mind is somebody who's depressed or somebody who's really struggling to deal with their mental health. And what I'm finding, for me, the more I think about the subject and the topic about mental health, is that it's really a 50-50 split, but the focus is usually on the negative side, which is completely understandable, because, you know, whenever you think of a person's mental health, it really only comes up when they are facing the struggles or difficulties that comes with their mental health condition. And so I've been thinking about the terms of mental health and mental strength, and how mental strength can really help to improve your mental health. And that's something, listen, you know, I'm no guru on it, but this, again, as with any of these videos, taken with a pinch of salt, this is just my views from my experience. And I find that for me, that the defining moment where I was able to recognize that things started to change in terms of how my mental health was whenever I started to work on my mental strength. Now, the mental strength part is kind of working out different strategies, coping mechanisms, and things like that. But I find that it's a little bit more than just trying to find like a bit of meditation to calm your mind and quieten down all the anxiety that you might go through as part of mental health issues. So for me personally, what I found was taking the time to try and identify where certain thinking patterns were, how I viewed things, how did I react to things. And I've said it before in other videos where I noticed that for me, you know, I was going around and around in circles for years and years, with issues with my wife that weren't her problem, that weren't her fault. It wasn't her fault, it was my fault. And the different aspects of all of that put together, you know, the responsibility came down to how I saw things and how I interpreted things, and how I told myself then about how I was going to feel, or what I was going to tell myself. Kind of more or less laid out a roadmap of how I was going to feel. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if you keep on telling yourself, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, that everything will be okay. It's not kind of affirmations. Affirmations are, you know, they're okay, but they don't work. I mean, like, telling yourself that you're going to be successful is absolutely useless unless you have a strategy and a plan of action in terms that is quantifiable, and that you're able to track, that you go from point A to point B to point C, and you're able to track your movement and progress. Whereas if you just keep on thinking to yourself, someday I'm gonna make it, someday I'm gonna change, well, nothing is ever going to change unless you do. And so I found this for myself, and more so, the biggest area for this was my personal mental health. And it came, my mental health improved the more I focused on building up my mental strength. And the reason why I wanted to talk about mental health, or this subject, or this topic, is because anytime you see a post that goes up on social media, there's always a lot of people that come out and show support for others who are facing the challenges that they're going through. And that's generally because the vast majority of people go through similar challenges on a regular basis, some find great ways to deal with it, and others are maybe finding their way to deal with it. And there is something very comforting to know that somebody else understands and knows what you're going through and how it feels and how it makes you feel. And when you're down in the dumps and dealing with a bad kind of spell of mental health, I want to say mental health, it covers such a wide variety of things. An old friend of mine commented, I put a post up on Facebook today about mental health, and he kind of said, well, what do you mean when you say mental health? Because, you know, between Asperger's or ASD or ADHD or depression, anxiety, all of these things, you know, can kind of get wiped with the same brush. And I think that all of those things are inevitably linked when it comes to the topic of mental health, because although there's different areas and how it affects your life, how the results and the effects of those different conditions come about or manifest themselves in your life, they all have a bearing on your ability to cope mentally with those different conditions. So it's not to say that mental health means all of them, but they are connected in some form, that while they're all different separate issues, they all come down to a single point of mental health. Your ability to cope with the mental pressure or the mental challenge, if you want, to be able to put together strategies to cope with those difficulties, whether it means conforming, whether it means, to give you an example, my son James is 10 years old, and he struggles with anxiety, social anxiety, and he has ASD. Now, he's a high function ASD. That means that, you know, he's not impaired, and if you walked into a classroom, you know, he would generally blend in with everybody else. And part of it for him is where he has forced himself to conform to the environment that's around him. And while that kind of works to the benefit and of overall, an overall society kind of expectation, if you want, of him to behave and function in a certain way, while he's able to do it, it's putting him under a lot of pressure. And so, you know, this is quite personal for me to say, but, you know, we had James was he got assessed by an educational psychologist, and that she had found that there's little cracks within his personality of where he becomes very vulnerable as a result of pushing himself out to that point to conform and to be able to function within the environment that he's placed within. And that's the kind of example I'm kind of using in terms of whether you've got ASD or ADHD or depression or anxiety or whatever. All of those individual diagnoses on themselves, you know, carry their own consequences, but they all come back to a linked point of mental health. And now I've managed to discover a few things about myself over the last, you know, couple of years, and I've got ADHD, and I've had to kind of recognize, you know, and it was a whole process of figuring out why I thought a certain way, why did I have certain expectations, why was I feeling certain ways after the results of different expectations I put on myself never manifested the way I wanted them to. And so the results were very negative, and it ate away and it corroded the foundation for a strong mental health or having good mental strength. And so that's why, you know, for me it got to a point, one of all the different kind of aspects or ingredients of everything that kind of came together was where I ended up having a mental breakdown in 2016. And so I'm coming up March this year will be 3 years since I had my breakdown. I remember making a video this time last year talking about the mental breakdown that I had for the first time ever. And so it's funny, like, that's only just after coming to me now while I'm talking, that this time of year. But I also notice it with other people, and I think it's very much a visible thing to see when people are struggling and people are having difficulty. And so I don't know that having this talk and making this video will be of much benefit to anybody else. Hopefully it will. And if nothing else, hopefully it just identifies for maybe you as a single viewer that you're not alone if you're one of the people that kind of deal with these kind of challenges. And it's such a complex topic, because there's so many aspects that can contribute to mental health. Like, you're talking about depression, you're talking about anxiety or ASD, and these are all different conditions, but they can all come from ASD and ADHD are more kind of those are more genetic, with the likes of, from my personal, I'm not a doctor on this, and so I'm not an expert to say that my view is, you know, the only view on this, but this is just my perspective, is that when it comes to the likes of depression, it kind of varies in from two forms. One, where there's chemical imbalance, or two, where the subject who's dealing with that, or the person who's dealing with depression, could have faced some kind of trauma at one point in their life that it had such an impact on their mental ability that it can manifest itself in so many different ways that affects their life. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be that you're a person who's struggling with depression as such. You know, there's so many things that can affect a person's mental health or mental strength. And I suppose the point of this video, if anything, is to highlight the importance of mental strength. If you really want to be able to get... Now, I'm not saying that I'm cured. I'm not cured. But I certainly cope a hell of a lot better. And I feel so positive and good in myself. You know, on the good days and even on the bad days, I can muster up some of that, the thinking and the strategies that I have from my mental strength, that it gets me through those difficulties. And what I'm finding is that the more I focus on building my mental strength, the less I'm having to deal with those fallout and negative consequences of bad mental health. And so what I'm kind of getting now is where it used to be the mental health was down low, it's kind of balancing out now, and it's coming up. You know, so I've got good, strong mental health by comparison to what I used to, but because I focused on the ways to build up my mental strength. So my thinking ability, my perceptions, how I'm interpreting my feelings, how I'm interpreting situations that I'm in, friendships, expectations, how all of that manifests itself in life, with my business, with spirituality, with whatever, with relationships, and personal perception, how I view myself. You know, there's a poem, I can't quote it word for word yet, but it's on YouTube, and it's about the man in the mirror, and it's done in a lovely Welsh accent, and the guy, you know, and everything is for naught if you can't look yourself in the eye. And I remember physically looking at myself in the mirror and not being overly, I couldn't look at myself in the eye with any kind of happiness, with any kind of comfort, with pride in what I was doing, even though I was trying hard to be a good husband and a good father. I felt like such a miserable failure that I couldn't look myself in the eye. Now I can look myself in the eye. Now that's not to say that, you know, I'm doing so fantastic. It just means that I've kind of changed my perceptions, and so how I see things, how I'm able to identify what I am doing is good and what I'm doing versus bad, or where I'm trying to improve and have better understanding. So I'm after coming away from a training course here for my son. It was an autism awareness training day, and then there's workshop classes that my wife and myself will be doing throughout the year, and hopefully I'll get to do 1 or 2 with my son as well. And that's just one of the things where, do you know what, it's like talking with my wife. This year is a very busy year. There's a lot of videoing I'm doing in different locations. There's a lot of plans going into effect for the awards for Saltex 2019. Trying to get off the ground the GIE awards. That's very much in the process, and so there's a lot going on. But despite any of that, and trying to grow the business and rebranded the business, there's new equipment to get, there's a whole lot that's going on. But I said to my wife, like we take a calendar and we say this is where we're going on such a weekend, and we're doing that so many times this year that we're getting away camping with the family into different locations, some of them visiting with friends, some of them camping with friends. At the moment, what we're trying to do during this winter period is every Sunday go out for a walk to a different location, somewhere that we've never been before with the kids. Doesn't matter if it's for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, as long as we're getting out for a walk to somewhere new. It's kind of just breaking the mold and the routine for the family. And I feel much better doing that, and in a better place to be able to commit to that kind of thinking because of where my mental strength is and where my mental health is as a result of my mental strength. So if you're having difficulty, or somebody who's having difficulty, have a look at the ways in which to build your mental strength. Because looking at mental health is just like this astronomical thing that you're looking at, and you just have no idea where to start. What I'm finding is that looking at the areas of mental strength and how I see things, how I interpret things. So when I say interpret things, if I'm feeling sad or lonely, or if I'm feeling despair or whatever, I've read up books, I've listened to talks about, from experts who deal with these things for decades, and they can give you a bit of insight into like what the meanings of feelings are. And I remember learning a bit about, for myself, and kind of figuring out that nothing changes until you change. You have to make changes in order to manifest new results. And I remember kind of hearing, in more simplistic terminology, was from Tony Robbins, when he said about, if you're feeling depressed, that's your mind telling you that something needs to change. Otherwise, if it doesn't change, if you can't identify different areas, and it doesn't mean that there's just one area, it could be multiple different aspects of what's involved in your day-to-day routine, or your weekly, or relationships, or whatever, that could be having an effect on your mental ability, and it's kind of pulling it down to the point where you feel depressed. But if you're able to change out some of those repetitive things that are just kind of, if you're doing the same thing day in, day out, you're going to get the same results. If you think the same way day in, day out, you're going to get the same results. And so maybe changing something physically that you do can have a knock-on effect into what you're doing mentally. You see, change, it's an ever expanding state of experience. Whereas comfort zone, nothing grows, nothing changes, it stays exactly the way it is. Now, if you're in a comfort zone where everything is where you like it, that's great. But I find that there's more excitement in having change and trying to do different things all the time. And for me now, I'm kind of like looking at it over the course of a year and seeing how that, how change things this year, and then next year I'll try to. And I'm not talking about New Year's resolutions or anything. I don't believe in that. New New Year's resolution. You can change a year's resolution if you make a new resolution for yourself, or a new goal or ambition at any point. You don't need to wait for somebody to say, well, I'll wait until January before I change my mind, change things about. There's only ever here and now. And you can think to yourself, it'll come tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't exist, it hasn't happened yet. And so what you're doing is effectively taking the decision from today and putting it on the shelf until the time that you feel like doing it. Of course, circumstance might force that or whatever, but you know, making changes will really get you different results, and that's how you'll kind of experience better things. So 20 minutes in, that's it, video done. My views on mental health and mental strength. Hopefully there was something in there that might have helped you if you watch this video. Thanks very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, or don't like the video if you're a troll or a hater and you watched it all the way to the end, which I doubt you would doubt very much if you would. Normally I get the thumbs down straight away and they've probably done their bit and then head off. But yeah, thanks for all the support of you guys who have been a positive influence to me, and you have actually played a huge part in my mental strength for my own personal journey, more than you'll ever know. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you in the next video.